I feel like we're kind of in this position because of Corona in the first place, to be afforded the opportunity anyway. So it makes me laugh that Corona's going to swoop in at the last second and disturb the whole thing again. So, but look, you can't control it. So the only way to look at it is with positivity.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Western Australia has been relatively sheltered from the COVID-19 pandemic thanks to strict border closures and restrictions. But in an instant, a person with the virus spent a few days in the community and the state has been sent into a 5-day lockdown. What sort of impact will this have on local hospitality venues? And what landscape is it painting for the foreseeable future? Chris Howard is a co-owner of the Humble Onion in Perth, Western Australia. Chris, how you going?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Good. You were literally 17 hours away from opening your very first venue. What's it like over there at the moment?
It's very, very fresh at the moment. And when we're sat in the CBD right now, I'm quite surprised to sort of see quite a few people, whilst wearing masks and everything, out on the street. It's not quite the same ghost town that we had 11 months ago. But I think everyone's still at the stage of just trying to get all their supplies and all their things home and that sort of thing. We've got a Woolworths here at the base of NX100, the building that we're in front of, and there was a long line out the front of that when we arrived this morning.
Wow.
To keep packing down the venue. So, I think people are just, they're still scared, and I think most of them just want to stay home, so they need provisions to be able to do that,
Western Australia has had very few cases and been pretty virus-free for quite a while. What's it felt like having this news in the last couple of days?
Yeah, I think we went 10 months without a single recorded case. So, the feeling really was that we were kind of just over Corona. It was a thing in the news that was happening in a different world, So it certainly reminds you of how vulnerable we always are. But as well, I think really it's certainly the feeling, I guess you always see what you're looking for, but the feeling that we're trying to project is that we've done this before, and we know exactly what we have to do to get through it as quick as possible. I think we only were at such a stage of, say, freedom because we were so isolated and because we just shut down so quickly the first time. So this is a very preemptive measure from McGowan. And we support it wholly because I'd much rather close for a week and just delay our plans than have this thing sort of spiral out of control again.
You were set to open today. It's Monday at the moment. How do you feel about having that delay? Were you ready to open, or is it a bit of a breath of fresh air to have an extra week?
We were very ready. It's a bit not that I've ever been a boxer or a fighter or anything myself, but you really get yourself very psyched up. And it's been a really intense 6 weeks in the lead up to this, absolutely. So, you just kind of laugh because there's not where I feel like we're kind of in this position because of Corona in the first place, to be afforded the opportunity anyway. So it almost feels just kind of, I don't want to say fitting, but certainly it makes me laugh that Corona's going to swoop in at the last second and disturb the whole thing again. So. But look, you can't control it, so the only way to look at it is with positivity. More time to prep and more time to sleep certainly isn't a bad thing. But we should be 3 hours into our first service by now.
Well, as you mentioned, it's come about from the circumstances of the pandemic. Can you tell us about the Humble Onion and how it began?
Sure. So the Humble Onion is a name that I've probably said to I don't know how many chefs across the country now over the last several years. It's always a name I've had for a venue. But I was looking at getting together a kind of a catering business, and I wanted to start doing events and pop-ups and things under my own brand. And that was going to be at the start of last year. And then when the pandemic hit, I decided to take that, all the stuff I'd laid out and all the plans I had, and basically just that I was excited for it, and use that for a channel for cooking videos and for a platform that I thought, well, if we can build a base through this time, then afterwards we can look at going out and then doing live events, and it can sort of all come together. So the Humble Onion in its infancy was a YouTube and Instagram account where I was making videos at home and teaching people to cook from my own kitchen.
You mentioned that it was a name that you've had for a long time, and you've bugged lots of chefs over your career with that name. Where did it come from?
I have an onion tattoo on my right forearm, and that was one of my first tattoos. And I think it's wonderful because, again, sort of in the infancy of my cooking career, I always gravitated towards sort of the St. John with Fergus has always been a real idol in my mind. Sort of mentality of there's no bad ingredients, there's just bad execution. And I think that's really, really important. So, the onion to me was always kind of a symbol of that, to sort of have a bite out of a raw onion would be pretty dreadful. I'm fairly certain. I can't say I've ever done it myself. But when you treat onions well, I think they shine at least as well as, because you're always going to pair, your Wagyu steak with onions. It's having those things alongside. It's onions, the leek and langoustine terrine from Marco Pierre White, that classic pairing of the highbrow with the lowbrow. And so I think that's something that's only strengthened in my philosophy as I've moved forward in cooking. And it makes me very happy that I did that early on, because most of the decisions I made when I was 22 have not worked out so well. So it's nice to have a tattoo that's aged well with me instead of the opposite.
You trained in Perth at the greenhouse with Matt Stone. Can you take us back to those early stages of your career? What was that like?
Sure, yeah. The first cooking job that I had was out in the hills at a little winery, which I applied for just from Seek. It was between that and Feral Brewery, I remember. And luckily they called me back first. And that was out working for the Osborne family. And I think that's where I sort of fell in love with hospitality, because the family lived on site. It was Andy and Michelle and their 3 boys. And I really felt a strong connection to working for someone who was working there every day and seeing how hard they worked and how much they invested. Really, I found that very, very inspiring. But as far as the actual product we're making, when you're brand new, you don't really know. I wasn't very accustomed to going out to a lot of restaurants or anything like that, so I didn't really know what the good food was. So I'll sort of leave it there for the chef's sake. But I went to TAFE with a guy, Simon Kruger, who was working here at the greenhouse, and we just got on really, really well at TAFE, and we'd always work together and do all our little projects together and stuff, and we'd always take it way further than the briefing. So, we'd always be trying to scrounge extra ingredients and build these really elaborate dishes when we were just supposed to execute something pretty straightforward. And then when a position came up here, he sort of said, look, you should come and work with us. I had this image in my head of just this crazy laboratory kind of place, where there's this elusive stony guy who's in the corner like a mad scientist or something. To walk in the first time, and that was coming through the same NX building that I walk through every day now. And I walk in, there's plants all over the outside, and the smell of the wood fire oven when I first came through the doors was just everything. I'll never forget. And Matt was standing at the pass. He's plating a cabbage and radish salad into a plant pot. I remember that salad had an awesome allspice dressing. And he was probably wondering why I was staring at him like a weirdo. But I went out the back with Courtney Gibb, who was the then sous chef who ended up running the place. And we're on a milk crate, and he was just like, Simon says you're all right. Do you want to start? And that was it. There was no real trial or anything. So I always felt a very strong sense of responsibility to Simon to make sure that I, didn't stuff it up, because, I always felt like he kind of put his neck on the line for me to have an opportunity when I'd just been working at this kind of They didn't know the winery, It's not like I came from anywhere with a reputation. So I always wanted to make sure that I achieved higher than what everyone expected. But whilst I'd say that Darlington, the winery, was where I fell in love with hospitality, the greenhouse kitchen was where I sort of feel like I really started chefing. And that was where I really understood just so many more techniques and so much exposure to different ingredients. I mean, the chefs that we had in the kitchen were just amazing, It was a real community and, some really great healthy competition. And, it was a real band of brothers. It was absolutely wonderful.
You worked at many venues in Perth, but you also ventured to Tasmania and Melbourne. What's been some of the real big influences in your career working in those different venues that you've been at?
My time in Tasmania, I look back on as with incredible fondness. I was working at Cantina 663 in Mount Lawley at the time, and I'd been promoted to head chef, but I feel like really I was just kind of the strongest cook that did the ordering. I wasn't a leader, and I certainly wasn't a manager. And I was partying way too much, and I was very concerned with my ego and all the wrong things. So I just looked for jobs that were basically as far away from where I was as possible within Australia. So I looked at the east coast of Tasmania, and I think there was a job maybe on Lizard Island or something in North Queensland. And a bit like Darlington, they just got back to me first. So life can be very serendipitous sometimes. But so I was like just on the phone and took the job, and I was like, cool, I'll be there, in a few weeks, and that was that. And then I started looking at this place that I was calling Freycinet, which is the Freycinet National Park. Arriving in Tasmania was just insane. I'll never forget as you step off the tarmac at Hobart Airport. I'm not sure if it's the same now, but you're not actually in a terminal. You step out actually on the tarmac itself, and the air in Tasmania just feels different. It's amazing when you step out. It's thinner and it feels cleaner. It's like drinking bottled water. It's really amazing. And I picked up my car and didn't even have to go into Hobart at all. The airport's north of Hobart, and started heading up the east coast. And straight away, just the feeling of freedom and of being just it's wilderness. It's so beautiful and pure. It was just absolutely amazing. And then to combine that with working at Sapphire, which is a super luxe hotel, very small team, but very, very just amazing product and amazing standard. The executive chef there, Hugh Whitehouse, had Dali's. Back in his day, he was a two-hat chef and had brought and had trained right through Switzerland. And, he brought a lot of his team with him. And that was where I really got an understanding that, it wasn't about just cooking harder than everyone else. It wasn't just about, I can do 18 hours, you can't, therefore I'm a step ahead, or that's why I'm in charge, or whatever it might be. It was when the head chef sat down with me and he was like, Simon, and said, I'm not the best cook in the kitchen, but I am the manager. I am the best person to manage the kitchen. And that was a whole different world to me, because it both, between Greenhouse, El Publico, Cantina, all I saw was head chefs working to the absolute extreme of their capabilities. And that's what I thought a head chef did. I thought you were supposed to be the sergeant that was kind of over the trenches first sort of thing, and to really be able to see that, no, it's actually about things running smoothly. It's about things being very much under control and very well managed. That really opened my perspective. And I mean, the ingredients we had access to in that venue was just insane. There was no limit to anything between Robbins Island Wagyu and things that just blew my mind. And then, to be juxtaposed against a fisherman that would literally go out and just catch the fish for us and bring them straight to us.
Wow.
So, you're dealing with two completely opposite ends of the spectrum that you put together seamlessly. So that was just absolutely amazing. And we'd be out diving and fishing before work, and spend the weekends just outdoors. So the access to produce was just like nothing I've ever experienced, and it's very I don't want to say unfarmable, as though it's you just can't manufacture that kind of authenticity. I think in this day and age, especially, it's very, very hard to find things that are authentic. And man, if Tasmania is anything, it's definitely authentic.
Sapphire is a world away from a place like Town Mouse in Melbourne, which is no longer there, but you spent some time in that kitchen. How different was that experience?
Yeah, again, they're all, I think they all sort of came at the right time, and they were all not opposing, but they're all sort of different parts of a puzzle. So I was a sous chef at Sapphire, and my good friend Charlie had just been constantly trying to get me up to Melbourne, and I'd gone and seen him a couple of times, but I was always pretty hesitant. I lived in this house on the beach. It was $250 a week for this amazing house that overlooked Great Oyster Bay.
Wow.
It's still the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life. And I had my little veggie garden and my little ute, and I was pretty contented. But I sort of felt that I was starting to fall behind where I wanted to be going, as far as I was just getting a bit lax, and I didn't want to fall into a routine like I was living on holiday or something. So that was my mentality anyway. So I finally, he was like, look, there's a position opening up at the Town Mouse. You should go for it. So I was like, fine. So spoke to Dave, and everything was all good, and went up there and did a trial on the weekend and came home and was like, okay, I'm leaving. So packed up all my stuff and got rid of the house, which was obviously a very, very easy thing to find someone to take over the lease of, and sold my ute to my apprentice for no money whatsoever, and packed all my stuff up and was just there, a couple of weeks later. And then on my first day in the kitchen, at the end of service, they call everyone together, and they're like, we just want to let you know that the venue is up for sale. And
wow.
I just couldn't believe it. I was just like, oh my God, I've just made this huge move and this huge transition. And this is what's happened. And I mean, they were fantastic, and they said, this wasn't planned. And David said, there's a spotted ambler if you'd like to move there afterwards and all those things. But I'd sort of come up to try to do my time there in a way that I've seen so many other chefs that have gone on to incredible things through those kitchens, through Dave and Christian's venues. I wanted that experience. So, that was definitely a shock. But as far as the running of the kitchen and the running of service, I'd never seen anything like that before. And the front of house team especially, they were incredible. They were just absolute weapons. And I'd always kind of been used to, from remote Tasmania and just Perth sort of 10 years ago, very, very hard to find people that were career front of house minded, that really wanted to take it all the way. It was generally the job that people were doing until their real life started. And that was always something that's very hard in the kitchen because, this is kind of what I want to be when I grow up. So, but those girls were just incredible. They were absolutely amazing, terrifying. So that was great. And then to see how tight things can be run, that everything was so specific, that there was just no need for excess. There was no fat. And that was really, really wonderful. So, yeah, I love spending time there with, especially with Jasper. He's a really, really fantastic chef. And seeing the ideas that he'd come up with. We'd have every Sunday, I think it was Sunday, once a week, we'd all have to put up a dish and talk about it and try to get those kind of projects and those sort of things flowing. And it was really incredible to see what other chefs in that kitchen would put up and the way that their minds worked. And I learned a hell of a lot about the application of sourness and seasoning and the complexity of adding culture to almost everything that we did. And yet those things were absolutely wonderful, and it's definitely things I've carried with me.
You mentioned while you were head chef at Cantina 663 that you didn't feel like you were a leader or a very good manager, but now you've got your own venue. What's changed since those days to lead you in this direction?
Yeah, well, I mean, 6 or 7 years is probably one of the things, but I think then I was very much focused on going up. That's what I thought was important, was because when I worked at Greenhouse, Matt Stone was best young chef, gourmet traveller, and then I moved to El Publico when that opened, and then Sam Ward, best young chef, gourmet traveller. And I saw these kind of guys that I really idolized and thought, man, and there was so much focus put on that in the media. That you have to be the hot young talent, the best young, best new. That I really was like, man, if I miss this boat, my career's just gone. And I really thought that was the case back then, which certainly isn't a view that I share anymore. But that I put a lot of pressure on myself in that respect. So I always thought about it's about jumping over the person in front of you. So when I got to head chef, I was like, this is it. This is where I've always wanted to be. And then you realize that there's absolutely no top to the mountain whatsoever. And I listened to, Dave Chang and Joy Beef guys and everyone say the exact same thing for how much they've achieved, that everyone just says there's no end. And I think that by, making the decision, I was there for the best part of a couple of years, and making the decision to get away from that and to get out and see basically as much of the polar opposite as possible was incredibly important. But also, just as I've changed within myself, I think that now my mentality is everything is about breadth, and it's about getting as broad a foundation as humanly possible. That there's no such thing as going up, there's just going out. And I think if you focus on making your platform as big for everybody else as possible, the next thing you know, you've already climbed 3 steps before you've even blinked. You didn't even realize. So that's really been the shift in my mentality. Now, I mean, I actually studied teaching at uni before I got into the kitchen initially. And the teaching aspect of cooking has always been a huge draw for me. And that's something now that I put so much of my focus on is wanting to keep working with the same people and trying to have them feel the way that I feel when I cook, because there's nothing like it in the world for me. So I want to share that with as many people as I can.
When you were reflecting on your time at the greenhouse, you used the word "here" a couple of times, and that's because you're housed in the building that used to be the greenhouse. Can you tell us how you got that site for the Humble Onion?
Yeah. Sorry, I need to stop doing that because it's obviously it's not anymore. But I'm actually sat in the dining room, and I haven't really spent a great deal of time sat out here for a while. So it's pretty crazy. So I said I was making the videos for the Humble Onion channel because I sort of have a bit of a, hyperactive, creative thing where I just sort of don't like to stop making things. But so if I couldn't be in the kitchen, I had to put that energy somewhere. Making the videos and doing those things. And then this venue has changed hands a couple of times and was running as a cafe under the Fiore brand. A person that had worked years ago, he was a rep that used to come into Cantina when I was working there. He was a cheese rep then, was working for the company now. And so when the place wasn't doing so well here, he showed them my videos and he was like, look, I've known this guy for a few years and, check out his stuff and see what you think. And if you want, he can have a meeting. But just to discuss the idea that I would do a residency in the kitchen and they would keep operating the cafe as it was. He pitched me that idea as well, and I sort of wasn't initially very excited, but I always have this thing of like it's always worth a chat. That's sort of the thing I tell myself all the time, like just hear people out. So I met them in the morning for a coffee, and it was probably about halfway through the meeting with the CEO that I think he maybe noticed that I wasn't quite the usual thing that he was expecting, possibly, or wasn't typical of the interactions he'd had with chefs in the past, let's say. And he was like, would you consider taking over the whole space? And inside, obviously, I was moving very quickly, but on the surface, I was trying to stay very calm, and just sort of said, "Yeah, I'll think about that. Yeah, maybe." And then we had another meeting set for a couple of days later, and I went in with a full business proposal with my mission and vision statements and my core values for the business and everything laid out for him, to show that I was serious, but also that I would be competent. To have that kind of business acumen and to really push that forward. So it wasn't just, I was very worried that I'd be seen as just kind of an imposter and just some chef that wants to be the center of attention or something, and not for the right reasons. That to have the opportunity for a business like this, that's been my dream for a very long time. So I really wanted to, as always, just try to over deliver. He was really taken with that, and it just kind of snowballed from there. So what went from do you want to come and cook eggs for 3 months to hey, we'll take all our signage down. You can do anything that you want with the place and go crazy. So it's been a really crazy couple of months, to say the least. It's been absolutely wild.
Well, tell us a bit about the Humble Onion. What sort of food are you cooking there? What is your food?
Sure. I think, man, it's with the channel and with sort of how I have always been so interested in food. Like, I'd always be watching. Remember Yan? Like, Yan Can Cook, and watching like Julia Childs or. Keith Floyd, or who was like our guarantee, Justin Phillips. All these people, they always made food seem very attainable and very much like something that you can do if you want to, and that there's nothing scary or intimidating about it. And it's something that I always, a rhetoric that I always have for my chefs is that it's simple, but it's not basic. And I think that's really, really important. So. That always drew me, and certainly with the videos, that's what I wanted to display as well. Was I can show you the tricks. Whether you actually want to apply the knowledge is your business. Whether you actually want to practice this 1,000 times and get good at it is up to you. But I'll show you how it works, because I truly believe that everyone can cook and that everyone is connected to food. So when it comes to making my own food. There's not really in my mind a very strict hierarchy. When it comes to ingredients, I put as much value into all of them as I possibly can. It's why I've always had kind of a bugbear with truffle dinners and people that just take their normal menu and cover it in truffle and tell you it's a better menu now. That always just really shits me. I think so. The idea with this is really that I want to take I don't want to use the word humble, but the modest, humble food of my upbringing in my youth, that I'm sure a lot of people have a similar grounding in, and show that it's not bad food. It's just that the general, the normal sausages that you get, for argument's sake, are highly processed, and you don't know what's in them. Whereas mine are just full of Berkshire pork and a lot of thyme and the the bay trees that are still outside the venue from the greenhouse days. And it's just that I choose to hang them and ferment them and then smoke them and treat them really well. But when they come out to you, it's just a sausage with some fresh corn polenta and some pepperonata, because that's how I like to eat. So it's certainly not, I don't want to say trying to elevate or, gourmet, simple food or anything, because there are lots of people out there that do a wonderful example of the same sort of things. But there's just there's no hidden stuff. It's not a mystery. It's just effort. That's all. So yeah, you could say it's modern Australian, or you could say it was bistro, gastro pub-esque, or I don't really know. It's quite difficult at this stage for me to put a name on it. which makes me really happy because if I could, I'd feel like I was doing something that someone else had already done. So I like the fact that I just look at it and just see my food. And then the putting it in a box really is other people's prerogative, I think. Mine is to keep it as out of the box as I can.
You've got many friends in the industry over there. Have you had any conversations, and do you know what the general feeling is in the industry at the moment about the current lockdown?
Look, I mean, in the chats I've had with a few people just over the last 12 or 15 hours, everyone, I think most people are pretty positive in that it's a very preemptive measure at this stage. And as I say, we acted very quickly last time, broke the state down into sections and stopped people from moving straight away. And, those sort of things were very swift and we got through it very quickly as well. So whilst, no one enjoys, we were just sort of getting back to a stage of normalcy and people were really starting to, just get out and start doing things again. So that's certainly not a good feeling. But at the same time, more prep and more sleep and more planning and those things are never a bad thing. So, I think most people are feeling pretty positive.
Well, hopefully you're only a week away from opening. All that energy and adrenaline that you said you were holding on to, that'll build up again. What's it going to feel like when you finally get to open the doors of your own venue?
Oh, well, unfortunately, I wish I could tell you because that's sort of the big thing. But I'm not sure. I'm hoping. Yeah, I have no idea. I think it's going to be a lot of pride, and I'm very excited, and not just for myself. I think it's for my sous chef that I have here was working with me at the last venue. We were working there together. And he's come over to continue working with me, and that feels incredible to know that he believes in what we're doing so strongly. And there's the floor staff that we've known for a long time as well, and it's very much everyone coming together for this thing. We wouldn't have got this put together this quickly at all without our families who've been in every day working with us. It's just crazy the amount of work they've done. So I want it to be a success for them. I really want it to be good for all of them because I just want to make them proud of what they've contributed to, So I think there'll be a feeling of relief, and I'm sure there'll be a feeling of pressure as well because that's just life, There's never an action without a reaction. There's always a negative to the positive, but they're really, really great problems to have because hopefully we're just too busy and running around too fast and all those things that you really want from your first venue.
Well, Chris, having watched some of your cooking videos online, your energy is intoxicating, and I'm sure the venue's going to be a ripper when you do open the doors. We've loved having you on Deep in the Weeds, mate. Please keep in touch and good luck over there, and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks so much, Huck. It's wonderful to speak to you.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we share the stories of Australia's hospo community, suppliers and producers in search of hope during this pandemic. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.